It's adorable. Welcome to the couch, the sofa. This is the podcast. Dang, there's no like sofa or couch sound. It starts with P, huh?
Nope.
The podcast pillow place.
We don't have a pillow though.
Yes. Well, do you want to get started?
Yeah.
You can open if you want, because I've been opening all the time.
Okay. I really have to practice a solid, consistent opening, but let's go for it.
Okay.
Welcome to the Halfie Project podcast. I'm Cedric Sky-Seti, your host, and my co-host Becky sitting to my left, and we are so happy that you guys are joining us today, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube. We're very excited because we have a fun show and very interesting show today, and I learned a lot that I had no idea about, and so we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
So we're super excited.
Yes, and I like our new setup. I think people are probably wondering, like, whoa, is this a whole new thing? Sorry, my papers are flying all over the place.
Yeah.
But I like it. I think it's really cozy, you know?
Yeah, it's in development. I think we, I don't know, we're trying out something new.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, don't get too used to it for those of you guys that are watching. But yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah, we're just kind of shaking things up. And this is one way that we're doing it. Well, as Cedric so vaguely said, we have a cool topic for you today. And actually, so before I reveal what it is to people, did you have any idea at all about anything of this topic?
Zero,
right?
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a surprise for me as well to do the research. Actually, I had heard about this, and it's all very like random, you know, and so it's kind of weird how it culminates here on the podcast doing all this research and being like, whoa, that's what it actually is.
Right.
So I will now give it away. We are talking about a birthmark that is called the Mongolian Blue Spot. And probably the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Mongolian Blue Spot, I mean, what would you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's fair for me to answer that now because I know what it is.
But like, you don't know anything.
Mongolian Blue Spot. I would have imagined that it is some sort of a genetically passed down feature that Mongolians, the ethnic group Mongolians, would share. That's what I would have guessed.
Right. And actually, that's what I thought it was this whole time. So I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. Let me tell you a quick story about how I first learned about the Mongolian Blue Spot. I actually have a friend who's Mongolian, and I don't know if she listens to this podcast, but she and I met in university. And I remember that she was talking about the Mongolian Blue Spot. I have no idea how we got on the topic, but she was saying like, oh yeah, all Mongolian children are born with a blue spot. And she said it's on your butt. Everyone has a blue spot when you're born on your butt.
Right.
And she said it's like a piece of the sky. Because if you have seen photos of Mongolia, you will know that they're very famous for just the wide open space and just that endless, clear, gorgeous blue sky. Have you seen pictures?
I have actually. Well, researching for the show.
Right.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's stunning. And
we don't see that here in Korea.
No, with the fine dust and all of that. So Mongolia is very famous for the big, gorgeous blue skies. And so I think actually they have like a celestial god or goddess that traditionally they had worshipped who lived up in the sky. And so having that blue spot on their bum, this is what she was telling me, is actually a sign that you have a bit of a sky in you, because all Mongolian children are part of this great country, this great big blue sky country, which is a very beautiful kind of folklore-y tale, you know? It sounds really nice to think like, wow, like I'm so part of this country that I even have some of the sky in me. It's a beautiful story.
Yes.
And we're going to shatter that. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. But I have a question. What about those Mongolian kids who are not born with it, which is probably a low percentage?
Right.
Do they not have the sky in them?
I have no idea. But we are going to assuage those fears as we come to realize that though it's called the Mongolian Blue Spot, it's not actually synonymous with Mongolian people. You made the point earlier, you said ethnic group Mongolian.
Yeah.
Why did you make that separation?
Because I'm very cautious when I talk about people groups, and I want to make sure that I can make a clear distinction because, I don't want to get into muddy waters. And so I just want to make it clear that when I say Mongolians, I'm talking about the people group, the specific group. Though I do know that the word Mongolian or Mongols can have a different meaning, especially in history.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. If you look back at it, and we'll get a bit more into this. So when we're using the term Mongolian on this podcast, and there might also be a couple of other archaic terms that have been phased out for the better.
Yeah.
They might crop up on this podcast, and we're using it in more of a historical kind of mindset, not necessarily to offend. So it's more just for educational purposes. So
100%.
Just bear that in mind as we're going through this podcast. So we're going to talk about the Mongolian Blue Spot as it's very commonly known. And it actually has a proper scientific name. And can you pronounce it?
It is, what is it?
Throw you under the bus.
Yeah, it's melanogite or something like that.
What?
Melanite?
Where did you find that? That's not at all what I
Oh,
found.
no? Oh.
I was like, wow, he's going to go off the top of his head.
No, I actually
really good
researched
memory.
this. Hold on.
Yeah.
I know there's a longer form, and then the shorter form has the word melanin in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but maybe you're referring to a different scientific word.
Yeah, I was really surprised if you had memorized this. I practiced it a few times, but I don't know how this is going to come out.
Okay.
Congenital dermal melanocytosis.
Okay. See, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to say.
The last one, right?
Yeah.
Congenital dermal melanocytosis is actually the scientific term for the blue spot, Mongolian blue spot. And it's called that, but in fact, it actually can appear in different shades of color. It's not always blue. Sometimes it's really dark blue, or it can be gray blue, even dark brown, depending on where it's found. Not on the body, but geographically, worldwide, in which ethnic groups it can appear. Basically, it's a type of birthmark that is, let's simplify it for now, has been found on many Asian children, especially Mongolian and Korean, actually. The blue spot, children will be born with it, and it'll be usually on their buttocks or their lower back, even as high as their shoulder. And it starts to fade away, and then it will disappear by the time you're 5, or even up to puberty, and then it'll just vanish. It's like this vanishing birthmark that kids are born with. And if you're trying to understand what it looks like, it's kind of it looks like a big bruise.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You pulled it up here.
Yeah, I have a picture of it. And it's a baby actually it's a pretty big bruise, or bruise-looking spot on the baby's back side. But, I feel like normally it's probably a little smaller than what I'm seeing here pictured.
Maybe.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the baby.
Yeah. Well, I heard in Korea they'll call it the blue fleck, Mongolian fleck, which obviously signifies something a little bit smaller. But yeah, it looks like a giant bruise. Like if I had just punched you and then you got a big bruise, it looks very similar to that.
Right.
Yeah. So I imagine it can be a bit scary for some first-time parents who had never seen this before. So there's no health risk to it. It's not a deformity by any means. And like we said, it disappears after some time. So then what's significant about it?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess depending on the perspective that you have, that you hold with the Mongolian spot, because with some, they have the folklore, and sort of the theories behind it, which isn't necessarily rooted in science.
Right.
Or not rooted in science at all.
Yeah.
But then you have the significance of the history of it and how it was coined and who it derived from.
Yes.
So you have that. And then you have the science and what it really is, which is, I think, where we're going to pretty much end up.
Yeah. That was a very succinct summary.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I kind of compartmentalized it in my head.
Ooh.
I mean, because depending on who you are, because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who still hold just those, I don't want to say false views, but just they have that folklore in their head, or maybe just a story that they heard from their parents or grandparents passed down, and this is what the Mongolian spot is, or whatever you call it in your own culture, and you just kind of believe it to be true.
Well, it's not necessarily harmful.
No.
Then let's start with the folklore stuff, because I think that would be a very interesting launching point for everybody. So the kind of the story goes, if you're in Mongolia, that is, that Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan, however you pronounce his name, when he was born not breathing. And so the doctor who birthed him just spanked his bottom so hard,
smacked his booty,
it left a big bruise. And then as he grew older, the bruises appeared, but then it appeared on his children and then the children's children. And so people were saying, oh, this is a mark that signifies you're an ancestor of Genghis Khan. So this is kind of one story of it. Did you find other folklore?
I mean, there's so in the Korean side, so there is, what is the name of the god? It's
Samshin Harmi.
Right. Sanshim Harmony, right?
Samshin Harmi or Samshin Harmony.
Right. And so I think that is where the baby's in the womb, and this god-like harmony, or
it's
grandmother,
like a shaman spirit.
Right, spanks it out of the womb or something like that, and it has a blue spot.
Just like, boop, get out of there.
Yeah, so I think I've never actually heard this in my life.
Oh, Samshin Harmi?
Yeah, I've never heard of it, but apparently it's still a thing, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if they really believe it these days, but it's still...
Yeah, I think it's more just
it's a cute little story to tell.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to talk about. This being slapped by a spirit in the womb is, it's a kind of common thing, actually. If you look in some other countries, they will also believe that. And depending on which culture is looking at the Mongolian blue spot, it can signify different things. So, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, it signifies like a goddess has left her mark to protect you from evil. This is one thing that I'd found. And then in which culture was this one? I'm not sure where I found it. But there were some other places where they'll believe it's like, oh, it's a sign that you've been touched by some heavenly powers. It can mean happiness. You were slapped, always slapped, right? Those spirits, like, they're pretty vicious.
Yeah.
Slapped by a spirit as a kind of like, it's like a blessing, Or also, for example, patronage of the heavens, the sky for Mongolia, right?
Right.
And so there's all of those kind of like folklore bits found here and there, depending on which culture you're looking at. And this was one that was really weird that I found. Apparently, there was a researcher, and I wrote out his name. I think it's Adil Korzabayev from Kazakhstan. And he believed that this was a sign that humans once mated with aliens. So
I don't want to even begin to imagine what that means. He was
saying like this is like the alien blood is still running in us. This is what he was believing. But as far as I can tell, he's the only one who believes that. Unless one of you guys do, in which case please write in. We'd love to hear from you. But now we keep calling it the Mongolian blue spot, but in fact it's actually found quite prevalently around the world. Yeah,
and other people groups, even in to my surprise, even in African Americans, because typically, or I should say, in Black people, African descendants, even some of them would tend to have it. Probably not in the same percentage of numbers. But even then, and the reason why I didn't know that was the case is because obviously there's more melanin, a little bit darker, so I didn't know if the same rules applied. But yeah, so even in Blacks, you have Native Americans, and even in some percentage of Caucasians as well.
Very small percentage, yeah. But this is, as we have found out, that it's closely tied to, mostly has to do with melanin, right? When you're born, or it develops, I assume, in the womb because it's birthmark, and then it's like under a certain layer of the skin. It's just a collection of some melanin cells under your skin. So of course there's no health risk. It fades away after time, but this is why it's not so common in white kids who are born, or more fair-skinned kids. So actually, so it can be found in like Mongolia, East, South, Southeast Asian, Central Asia, indigenous, Oceanians, right? Polynesians, Africa, Amerindians, some Latin Americans, even Turkey, right? And a question I had was, is this common in mixed kids? And I think that it seems to, there doesn't seem to be like any significant study on this.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't really find anything.
Did you have a blue butt when you were born?
You know, I'm not sure. I feel like I should ask my mom that.
That
would be a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I bet you did.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like my mom would have reminded me of it.
Reminded you?
Yeah, like,
Cedric, don't forget.
Like, oh yeah, you were born with a blue butt. But I mean, I do have a birthmark.
Yeah.
But it never went away. So the thing is, with the Mongolian spot, most of it goes away after a certain period of time when you're a kid. But for me, I still have this birthmark. So I think that's different.
Yeah, that's a different
I feel like
thing.
that would be different. Yeah.
You should ask. I will ask.
Yeah, you will ask my mom.
Yeah, she'll be like, okay.
Maybe, yeah,
I would be surprised if you had some form.
Right. I mean, and I'm thinking about my niece as well. If I remember correctly, she has a birthmark, but I believe it was pink, or is pink if she still has it. So I'm not sure.
It's probably not this one then.
Yeah, exactly.
Birthmark. Well, we mentioned that it is seen in many people around the world, even some like Inuit groups, right? Like way up in Greenland, for example. And how did the name then come to be? I think we should break down the etymology of the term Mongolian blue spot, because this is very significant to, I think, kind of understanding how to address this. Yeah. So you want to go with that?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, so it started with, and I'm sure you have the notes of the name, but it started with a German. What was he? As an anthropologist, right? So, and I believe he spent time in Japan.
Yeah.
And he would notice that in the little babies that were born, that a high percentage of them had this blue spot, which was not named at that point. And he was the one that coined the term Mongolian spot. But at the time, Mongolian or Mongols as an ethnic group didn't exist as we know it today.
Right.
So the way he used it was more of a categorical description of really the Asian people group, because the way back a little over 100, 200 years ago, the way they started to categorize and construct race was more based on physical location and also physical features. And it wasn't really based or rooted in science per se, which is why a lot of people say that race is a social construct, and I get that. But yeah, so this guy, he basically coined the term based off of the Asian, I guess, category of race, and used the term Mongol or Mongolian to signify like all of Asia or Asians or people with Asian features.
Right.
Which has since then, I think decades ago, that was pretty much ruled out as you don't want to use that term to describe Asians.
That's right. If you look up the term Mongolian and not to describe the ethnic group, you're going to see this is a archaic term now. People don't use it. And it actually was used even to describe medical terms. Did you know actually they used to use the term Mongol or Mongoloid to describe kids with Down syndrome?
Yeah.
Which I thought was really terrible. But thankfully that has changed, obviously. But let me just fill in some of the holes there in your description, which was very well said. So the German anthropologist you're talking about, his name was Erwin Baltz. I guess how would you pronounce that? Would Irvin Baltz?
Irvin.
That's not German.
My German
that was
attempt.
Very good. Erwin Baltz. So it was in the 1880s, and he was the physician to the Emperor Meiji and the imperial households. And so his kids were half Japanese, actually. So at that time, he was living in Japan. And yeah, you're right. He noticed the spots on the babies that he was taking care of because, he was a physician and anthropologist. And so this is where he was like, I should give it a name. So he did give it the name, and he called it Mongolian spots. And this was using the classification system that was created by not him, but Johann Blumenbach, who was another German physician anthropologist, and he's the guy who created that classification system. So when we use the words like Caucasian, what the terms they use. It's honestly, I feel a little bit like hesitant to even say it,
right.
but I feel that it could be good for people to at least understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. I mean, history is a little muddy and dirty, and this is one of the, I guess, aspects of history that doesn't, when we look back today, it doesn't really have a good, I guess, memory of of how they used to look at people and classify people.
But you can't just like wipe over that,
Yeah, I mean, as long as we put in our disclaimer, and obviously you guys that are listening and watching, we would hope that you know that
we're not trying to go out here using racial slurs.
No.
So it was Johann Blumenbach in 1775. He had this book called On the Natural Variety of Mankind, which was extremely various, obviously, since he only made 5 categories to describe every single person on the planet. And the 5 categories, simply put, was Caucasian to describe white people, Malayan to describe brown people, Ethiopian to describe black people, American for red people, Mongolian for yellow. So this is how he basically broke it down. And there will be other terms that he would use, like Mongolian, Mongoloid, and like kind of, I guess, like bits like that, using words. Basically, it was broken down into those 5 parts.
Right.
And so because it was Erwin Baltz was seeing this blue spot on the Japanese children, he was like, oh, this must be like an Asian thing. But he called it, of course, a Mongolian thing. So Mongolian blue spot. And you're right, at that time, Mongolia didn't even exist as a country.
Right.
It was still part of the Qing dynasty. So that's how the term kind of came to be, but then it stuck. And I really have to wonder how or why. It was just so perpetuated, I guess.
Yeah, that's true, because even modern day physicians, even, or people who deliver babies, they I read an article, I believe we read the same article, where they made the mention of I guess a person who was delivering babies that knew of the term but didn't really know where it came from, just knew that was the thing. So it's still around, even in the West. It's a thing.
It's very easy to just keep it going on, especially when you have this very strong folklore imagery of Genghis Khan, who went and pillaged and plundered and raped so many people in places, like from China to Persia, like all over, even up to Europe. And so there's so many descendants of Genghis Khan running around still today. You might be a descendant.
I might
be a descendant.
Who knows?
Yeah. And so like, I think they say like 8% of Asian population is somehow related to Genghis Khan.
Dang.
So
that's crazy.
He was a very busy guy.
One man.
I know. Yeah.
Anyway.
Very busy guy. So it's very easy to kind of fall into that idea, like, oh well, yeah, if you had the blue spot, it's because you're related to Genghis Khan, which in a way is kind of like cute and exciting. Like, oh, he was my great grandfather. But unfortunately, that is not true. And they did see these spots even with like I said, like Inuit people. And so at the time, 1880s, right? So Erwin Baltz, he first noticed it, and then he sent his research to Berlin in 1901. So that was the first time it hit Europe, and people were like, whoa. And then it was also seen in 1770s by a guy named Hans. Oh no, I'm gonna butcher this. I'm so sorry. Hans Igid Sabye.
That was pretty good. Sounded very natural to me.
Oh man. He was a Danish priest and botanist, and he saw these on babies that he was helping to help birth in Greenland with the Inuit people. So then this is all the way up in Greenland. And so this is when he noticed that as well. And then in 1849, there was another Danish guy, Daniel Friedrich Eskrit. Dang, I should have looked this up. He was a doctor in Copenhagen, and he also saw children. He called them mixed babies, and I don't really know with what race or ethnicity. But these babies that were being delivered, he also saw it there. So you can see that people were making note of this. And actually through time, it's very medically well documented.
Yeah.
You'll find lots of mention of the Mongolian blue spot or the congenital dermal
melanocytis. That's probably not it.
Congenital dermal melanocytosis. Oh, wow. I don't know where my words went. But we can see that this has been happening all over the world with prevalently in some specific groups. Interestingly, Korea. There was a report that came out in 2014. And they reported they checked almost 2,000 babies over the span of this research. And they found that the Mongolian blue spot was seen in 97% of the babies.
Right.
So it was kind of to prove something. I don't know what, but just to say like, wow, Korea also has blue butts.
Right. I mean, I think to that point, probably a lot of Koreans who understand that, they are not exclusive, but they, as a people group, most of them have blue butts. It's sort of a sign of, you know what, you're purely Korean. It's a way to just sort of reinforce that nationalistic / ethnic, I don't want to say superiority type of mindset.
But it's like pride.
Yeah, it's a ethnic pride. And I think a lot of people who kind of subscribe to the whole, I guess, blue butt.
Do you subscribe to this philosophy?
To the blue butt philosophy. I feel like it sort of reinforces, I guess, their idea of being Korean.
Right. It's kind of a belonging thing. Yeah.
And it's almost, I don't know, it's obviously more rooted in science than what they would like to believe, but I think that is one way that it can be a good thing for national pride and being proud of yourself, but it can also be a little too exclusive.
I suppose so. I think I think we have this capability, and by we I mean every human on this planet, to have some capability to make the in crowd and the out crowd.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's because you like eating at In-N-Out, or you have a blue butt, or you prefer Yankee candles over anything else. If there is a majority that exists, then the minority will always be the out crowd.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That is a very good point.
So I don't think it's necessarily because you have a blue butt that makes anything special, but it's because you're part of the majority. Right? I want to know if I had one. I'm very curious. How about this? You ask your mom, I'll ask mine.
Okay. And fair enough.
We'll see what they say.
Yeah. I mean, I have pictures. I have a lot of naked baby pictures, but I don't know if there's any exposing my butt.
Oh, so it's just full frontal nudity.
I think so. But I'll double check. I'll confirm for you guys.
Oh, okay. He's going to share it.
I don't mind sharing it.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've got a couple in my computer.
Okay. So. Well, if people ask. So if you have any kids and you think that maybe they have some kind of birthmark similar to what we are describing, we'd love to know.
Yeah.
It'd be very interesting, especially if your kids are mixed. I think that's something I'm quite curious to know. Like, is it more likely or less likely? Does it really have to do with quote unquote genetic purity to see when this spot appears? So I'd be very, very interested to know that. And I know some of our listeners have kids. So yeah, if your kids are under 5, you should take a look and let us know, because I'm really curious to see if that's common with mixed kids.
Yeah, that would be very fun to see.
Yeah. I mean, don't send photos, but you could just tell us.
Please.
So we're going to wrap it up here. But first, I actually do have listener mail. This came in. It's called A Response to Why Hip Hop is a Different Story. If you didn't listen to that episode, I highly recommend it. Honestly, that one was one of my favorites so far.
Yeah, mine too. And it was definitely worth a listen.
Yeah.
A lot of nuggets in there.
It was really fun to research and record. So this one came from Chris Kim, and he says, Dear Becky and Cedric, I am loving the podcast. I am a Korean American writing to you from the United States. As podcast hosts, I feel as though you all have been able to strike a magnificent balance by being authentic, open-minded, and empathetic on the topics you touch on and to the interviewees in your podcast. Ooh, magnificent balance. Those are pretty strong words. Thank you, Chris. Personally, you all have inspired me to analyze my Korean identity when much of my life as a Korean American has been trying to suppress it. So thank you. I wanted to respond to your latest episode on why hip-hop is a different story. I really enjoyed the episode given its relevance in these very tumultuous times for Black African Americans. I appreciated specifically your comment, Cedric, on calling out the K-pop industry on appropriation. I do think that the K-pop industry, as well as individual artists, should be doing more to address the origins of hip-hop and rightfully paying homage by respecting and acknowledging the cultural element to what hip-hop represents. Yes, it is a music genre, but as you both address, the origins of hip-hop and its cultural legacy imprint specifically on the US, but also globally, transcends its designation as solely a genre of music. As a fan of Korean hip-hop myself, I am constantly trying to stay aware of auditory and visual styles that emulate American hip-hop. As Cedric pointed out, I think Zico, an artist whose style I do love, is a perfect example of this cultural ignorance and appropriation of hip-hop culture. I ended up watching the music video of Tough Cookie, and he was indeed sporting a jacket with the Confederate flag, most likely out of ignorance. However, the first time I was caught off guard with his videos was when he had his hair in dreadlocks in his Bermuda Triangle music video. I'm not sure if this is talked about in Korea, but non-black individuals who have dreadlocks for stylistic and or social gain purposes, in other words, not natural dreadlocks, can be seen as appropriating black culture. And he sent us an essay link to explain more about that, and we'll definitely read that.
Yeah.
This is all to say that I'm very glad that you have both touched on the topic of Korean hip-hop. I do think individual artists like Zico, as well as the K-pop industry as a whole, needs to do better in addressing their borrowing or taking of other cultural signifiers, especially as the Korean music entertainment industries have been making their way to the mainstream global stage. I hope the Halfie Project podcast can use its platform to leverage its influence over listeners and better shape aspects of the larger music entertainment industry. Hopeful I know, but y'all are that good. Peace and love, Chris.
Man, Chris, thank you so much for that. That was very well thought out, very well put as well.
Yeah.
And very encouraging. It lets us know that we're on the right track. And with that episode specifically, Becky and I, we really put in a lot of hours of just not only researching, but just making sure that we can articulate everything that we needed to talk about in a way that would resonate with everyone.
And you really had to catch me up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't call myself a hip-hop fan by any means.
No, but I'm very proud of you because you got into it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think I don't yet quite like connect on that very like visceral level.
Yeah.
You know, but I can really appreciate it. It's like you can feel compassion for another person even if you haven't been through that situation, right?
Yeah, of course.
I feel like it's kind of like, that's just my weak metaphor for it. But I'm still learning. And Chris, thank you so much for that mail. That was really, really encouraging.
Yeah.
And you did a great job writing out your thoughts. And so we're really encouraging you as well as you're exploring more about your identity and what does it mean to be Korean? What does it mean to be Korean American? And what does that look like for you? So if you want to write into us, you can always send us mail at thehalfieproject@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast anywhere that you listen to it, as well as the YouTube channel, The Halfie Project. And follow us on Instagram if you want to see more photos and stories of what's going on behind the scenes in the daily life in the Halfie Project team. And I guess that's it. Do you want to close us out?
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. We are The Halfie Project.
Good.